In a grand office piled high with documents, more scrolls and papers are slammed onto an already overflowing desk. Roselda Salas freezes mid-task as a voice breaks the silence. The male lead, Cashin Artez, looms over her with a smug grin. He points out that her hands have stopped moving, mockingly asking if she has too much free time. Roselda's face twists in pure frustration. She was certain she had been reborn as the heroine of the story, so how on earth did she end up being tormented by the one man she tried to escape? As Roselda Salas, the novel's beautiful heroine, she had expected a peaceful and easy second life. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. This was a brutal romance filled with suffering. The original protagonist faced constant threats, from being captured to having her life put in jeopardy. A happy ending just wasn't worth that kind of nightmare. Roselda firmly decided against that fate. She made a new vow: never get involved with the male lead and simply live a quiet life as a countryside noble lady. Her perfect, peaceful life shattered like glass. One moment everything was fine and the next it was all gone. Her mother approached her, sobbing into a handkerchief. She apologized profusely, explaining the worst had happened right before Roselda's debutante ball. The family was completely bankrupt. Watching their home get stripped bare, Roselda collapsed in despair. She couldn't believe it. Did one tiny change to the original story really ruin everything? She should have just used her future knowledge to get rich instead of trying to be a simple country girl. Roselda knew there was no time to wallow in self-pity. With her debutante ball ruined, she focused on a new goal: earn money and pay off her family's crushing debt. Soon, she found a promising job advertisement for an aide in the second prince's office. Her hope turned to dread when she realized the prince was Cashin Artez himself. She remembered how the original heroine constantly faced life-threatening danger because of him. Despite the terrifying risks, Roselda had no choice. She desperately needed the money, and this was her only option. With her application sent, Roselda journeyed to the capital that winter. In a cruel twist of fate, she arrived on the exact same day the original heroine did in the novel. She stepped into the second prince's office, the aptly named Winter Palace, surprised by its cozy atmosphere. Her expectations were immediately confirmed when Cashin Artez, without even a greeting, challenged her to prove her skills on the spot. Unfazed, Roselda had already braced herself for this. She knew something like this was coming the moment she walked through the door. Instead of the difficult test she expected, Cashin welcomed her with a surprisingly warm smile. He told her the interview was just a formality, as her resume was too impressive to pass up. Roselda was completely floored. This polite, charming man was nothing like the cold-hearted male lead from the novel. He handed her the employment contract, and her jaw dropped. The salary was huge, and it came with a house, a maid, and other incredible benefits. Overjoyed by this unbelievable offer, she immediately accepted, thanking him profusely for the opportunity. Blinded by her good fortune, Roselda didn't see the warning signs. She never stopped to wonder why she was the only applicant for such a perfect job, or why a powerful prince was being so unusually kind. She was completely clueless that Cashin had been watching her with a sly, knowing smile the entire time. A detail about overtime pay gave her a moment's pause, but the incredible salary was too tempting. Without further hesitation, she picked up the quill and neatly signed her name, sealing her fate as his new aide. 1 year has passed, and Roselda's dream job is a total nightmare. She's buried under a mountain of paperwork when Cashin calls her name. With a dazzling smile, he announces at 6 o'clock, the start of her beloved double-pay overtime. Internally, Roselda is screaming, calling him an absolute devil. Cashin catches her death glare and teases her for being relaxed. She snaps back, claiming she was just checking his collar. He just scoffs, smugly declaring he would never make such a simple mistake. Roselda fumes over Cashin's smug confidence, but when he suddenly stops and stares, she panics, wondering if he heard her thoughts. In a flash, he's right in front of her, tilting her chin up. Stunned, she stammers his title. He smirks, telling her to worry about her own messy hair instead of his perfect shirt, then tucks a loose strand for her. As he walks off, she mutters that his only good quality is his face. Then he casually drops a bombshell. There's a surprise audit tomorrow, leaving her absolutely speechless. Cashin instructs Roselda to wear something for the audit, then snaps open a velvet box. Inside sits a breathtaking tiara, sparkling with rare jewels. Roselda freezes, recognizing the infamous headpiece that was confiscated from another noble family. A cold dread washes over her as she understands his plan. Wearing this tiara would be a direct insult to the aristocracy. She stares at his smug grin, screaming in her mind. He wasn't just giving her a gift, he was using her to declare war on his enemies. The carriage arrives at the Grand Winter Palace. Roselida steps out, forced to wear the infamous tiara. She looks stunning, but inwardly she's furious. This whole situation is a nightmare. She didn't want to come to the audit in the first place, and now Cashin has made her a walking target. With his smug grin right beside her, she realizes she's the opening shot in his war against the aristocracy. They head towards the ceremonial court, the very heart of imperial power, where every noble eye will be on her. The ceremonial court is filled with stuffy, old-fashioned elders. Roselida knows these nobles are far from upstanding citizens. They use their status to rake in bribes and blow it all on extravagant luxuries. They are an absolutely insufferable bunch who judge everyone by their rank. As much as Cashin infuriates her, Roselida admits he has one good quality. He judges people by their ability, not their social standing. But she knows these aristocrats will see her as nothing more than a debt-ridden baron's daughter, and she shrinks under the weight of their inevitable scorn. The nobles' whispers fill the air, but Roselida is lost in a horrified realization. The tiara on her head isn't just any jewel, it was confiscated from a noble family busted for tax evasion. Cashin is making her wear stolen goods to taunt the very people he's auditing. She glares at him, fuming internally about this new level of workplace torment. He just smirks, telling her not to burn a hole through him with her stare. Playing it cool, she claims she's just tired, but her mind screams at the impossibility of relaxing in this lion's den. Roselida recalls the original story's male lead, Cashin Artez. On paper, he was perfect, handsome, a brilliant worker, and a master swordsman. But she knows his life was set to the highest difficulty. His mother died in childbirth, and he was born without the imperial family's signature blue eyes. Because of this, his stepmother, the Empress, called him a cursed failure. He was relentlessly tormented by the court, and even his own father, the Emperor, neglected him completely, leaving the young boy to fend for himself in a world of shadows. As if the family drama wasn't bad enough, Cashin also had to endure constant death threats and political schemes. The second he came of age, they shipped him off to the battlefield to die. Roselida recalls from the novel that the original heroine getting involved with him was a dangerous turning point. She glances at him and finally understands. After a life that brutal, it's no wonder the guy became an unhinged workaholic. Suddenly, the carriage lurches to a stop. Cashin smirks, announcing they've arrived at the ceremonial court. As they step into the court, the whispers start immediately. The nobles are appalled, gossiping about the girl with the nerve to wear a confiscated tiara. They blame Roselida for Cashin's aggressive behavior, claiming he's been making enemies ever since she showed up. Roselida hears every word, but keeps a strained smile on her face. She's absolutely fuming. How could they blame her? He was like this long before she arrived. Ignoring them, she tells Cashin they should just get the work done and go home. He smirks, thinking to himself, "That's our Rose." Cashin announces the start of the audit. While Roselida thinks he's a total jerk, she can't deny his brutal efficiency. He immediately confronts a shady nobleman, calling out ledgers with suspicious funds. The official sputters that Cashin is being disrespectful, but the prince just demands access to the archives. With a wicked grin, Cashin reveals he's already found evidence of embezzlement. He asks the man if he wants to be held accountable right now before the real audit even begins. The nobleman freezes, absolutely terrified. Cashin orders the archive to be opened, but the panicked nobleman insists he can't. With a devious smirk, Cashin turns his attention to Roselida. He tells her to open it. She's completely confused, thinking he could do it much faster. He points to her tiara, asking what its purpose was if not for this exact moment. Suddenly, it clicks. This was his master plan all along. He was giving her the authority to get back at everyone who insulted her. He asks if she wants to blow off a little steam. Roselida feigns ignorance, but Cashin just steps closer with a wicked grin. He leans in and whispers a tempting offer, 5 times her pay just to open that single door. Her eyes go wide. The deal is too good to refuse. Without a second thought, she marches right past the fuming nobleman. He shouts, demanding to know how she dares ignore him. With a smug smile, Roselita turns and reminds him that her authority comes directly from the second prince. She doesn't have to listen to a single word he says. With a cheeky thumbs up, Roselita declares that she only follows His Highness's orders. The nobleman explodes in a rage, calling them the demons of the Winter Palace. Roselita pauses, remembering that was Cashin's famous nickname in the story, and wonders how on earth it became plural. Brushing it off, she steps past the defeated official. She tells him it doesn't matter what he calls her. With 5 times her salary on the line for this one job, a silly nickname is the least of her concerns. The enraged nobleman screams, calling them the devils of the Winter Palace. Cashin just smirks, coolly remarking that their reputation is reaching new heights. Roselita, on the other hand, is absolutely mortified. She can't believe she's being lumped in with his terrible nickname. She recalls from the novel how the Empress first used that title to control Cashin. Later, it became a symbol of his relentless actions for the heroine. Even though things are playing out similarly, Roselita knows one thing for sure. She's the one getting ground to dust by this devil. Internally screaming, Roselita just wants this whole ordeal to be over. Cashin, completely unbothered by their new nickname, smoothly suggests they get back to work. With a sharp sigh, she agrees, just wanting to finish the task quickly. They dive into a dusty, 10-year-old archive, immediately buried in mountains of paperwork. Cashin complains about the terrible condition of the files. Roselita chimes in, realizing she'll have to trek all the way to the palace to organize even more documents. It looks like it's going to be a very long day. As they head out, Cashin teases that his precious aide will be stuck with overtime. Roselita immediately shouts her refusal. But before they can argue, they're stopped by an enraged Lord Gash. He furiously demands to know what Cashin is thinking, first inspecting the archives alone, and now appointing Roselita as the head of audit for the Office of Ceremonies. He points right at her, sneering that a lowly baron's daughter is completely unfit for such a prestigious role, leaving Roselita stunned. Before Roselita can even react, she steps forward to address the fuming nobleman herself. She calmly reminds the director that she had already stated all complaints must be submitted through formal documents. Infuriated that she dared to interrupt, Lord Gash roars at her. But Roselita isn't backing down. She asks him if he would have acted this way if the first prince's aide were standing in her place. The Lord sputters in disbelief. With a final, crushing blow, Roselita tells him to formally document the difference in status between the prince's aides. With a final, devastating smile, Roselita promises to review his official complaint. Lord Gash trembles with fury, completely speechless. Having won the battle, she calmly turns to Cashin and says it's time to go. As they walk off, she scoffs at the ridiculousness of it all, thinking she works harder than the first prince's aide anyway. Cashin, silent until now, watches her with a thoughtful expression before suggesting they head to the Winter Palace. Left in their dust, Lord Gash finally roars at her to know her place, but Roselita is already gone, just feeling tired. With the stressful day behind them, Roselita moves to take off her fancy hairpiece. Cashin suddenly stops her, calling it a waste and admitting he thought it suited her well. Stunned by the rare compliment, her confusion grows when his expression turns serious. He asks if Lord Gash's insults had hurt her. Before she can answer, he leans in impossibly close, whispering that he was considering giving her compensation. Shocked by his sudden proximity and intense gaze, Roselita's heart hammers in her chest, leaving her completely flustered and speechless. Cashin smirks, clarifying that his compensation is the financial reward she loves so much. Roselita's face burns red. She knows he's just teasing her, but she still gets flustered whenever she sees his handsome face. With a cool expression, he asks if she doesn't want it. All her composure shatters in an instant. Forgetting her pride, she screams that she absolutely wants the money. Later that night, despite the playful moment, Roselita finds herself buried under a mountain of paperwork, sighing that she ended up working late again. After another late night, Cashin praises Roselita for her good work and offers to drop her off. She cheerfully refuses, figuring a workhorse like him should spend that time working instead. But as she turns to leave, Cashin grabs her arm and pulls her in close. With a serious look, he tells her to be very careful on her way home. Before she can react, he forbids her from even thinking about walking. Completely surprised by his sudden intensity and concern, a bewildered Roselita quietly agrees to his demand. Cashin escalates his concern, declaring he'll have the Imperial Knights escort her carriage. Roselida is baffled by the extreme measure for a simple 10-minute ride. Brushing it off with a laugh, she tells him not to worry, asking what could possibly happen. Later that night, her confidence vanishes when the carriage is ambushed by armed thugs demanding she be handed over. As her driver orders her to stay inside, a horrifying realization hits Roselida. She's staring into the faces of kidnappers, exactly what Cashin had warned her about. The plot is happening. Instead of panicking, Roselida scoffs. She knows exactly who sent these goons, the director, and she's furious at his pathetic attempt. This is her chance to teach him a lesson. While orders are secretly given to capture the thugs alive, Roselida is already thinking 5 steps ahead. The ambush has delayed her trip home, which means one thing. With flames of determination in her eyes, she realizes this is the perfect opportunity to work more and demand that sweet, sweet overtime pay. The next day, chaos erupts at the Office of Ceremonies. The director is unceremoniously hauled away by guards, sputtering about his prestigious standing. But Cashin isn't having it. With a cold voice, he points out that the man has a lot to say for someone who tried to kidnap his aide. He then declares that all other corrupt officials will also be removed. Roselida sighs, bracing for the inevitable drama. But then, a much more important thought consumes her. If she can just get through today, a 3-day vacation awaits, and she plans on spending it entirely in bed. Just as Roselida's mind fills with visions of a peaceful vacation, Cashin calls her name. His cheerful tone immediately puts her on edge. His next words confirm her worst fears. He orders her to attend the year-end Imperial Ball. She is about to flat out refuse, but he dangles an irresistible offer. Her bonus won't be doubled, but tripled. On top of that, he'll provide a magnificent dress and jewels, all of which will be hers to keep. The thoughts of her relaxing break vanish, replaced by the beautiful glimmer of cold, hard cash. Of course, Roselida couldn't refuse an offer like that. Soon, the night of the Imperial Ball arrives. As the grand doors swing open, an announcer presents Prince Cashin Artez and Lady Roselida Salas. The crowd murmurs as they make their grand entrance, a perfect picture of nobility. But underneath her elegant facade, Roselida is a bundle of nerves. This is her first high society event, and she's terrified. She glances at Cashin, wondering why he looks so comfortable. The man usually avoids parties like the plague, so his calm demeanor is seriously suspicious. Cashin leans in close, telling Roselida she looks breathtaking. Playing her part, she compliments him back, but internally questions his happy-go-lucky attitude. He's usually miserable at parties. With a genuine smile, he insists he's not just being polite. Suddenly, Roselida realizes this ball is a massive opportunity. She's been looked down on for years as the girl who never had a proper debutante ball. Tonight, she can finally shut down the haters and make her official entry into high society by greeting the Empress or another high-ranking royal. This is Roselida's big chance. According to custom, women greet the Empress, making this the perfect substitute for the debut she never had. With a deep, elegant bow, she and Cashin present themselves to the royal couple. The Emperor acknowledges Cashin, noting it's been a long time. But his stepmother, the Empress, immediately throws a verbal jab. She points out his rare attendance and asks if he's uncomfortable. Cashin smoothly deflects, claiming the Emperor's important duties simply kept him too busy to attend parties, leaving him no time for himself. Cashin's comeback is savage. He claims that unlike his brother who has leisure time for parties, he's simply a lacking individual. Roselida realizes he's throwing the Empress's own insults right back at her face. The Empress is furious, but can't react in front of the Emperor. Trapped, she pivots, suggesting they should hear Roselida's introduction instead. Just as Roselida prepares to speak, Cashin cuts her off. He introduces her to the Emperor, not as his fiancée, but simply as his aide, Lady Roselida. This puts her in an awkward spot. Roselida is floored. Cashin just ignored the Empress and introduced her directly to the Emperor, a huge breach of etiquette. The Empress trembles with silent fury, unable to react. Then, Cashin twists the knife, turning to his stepmother with a calm smile and asking for permission for Roselida to pay her respects. The public humiliation is clear. It finally dawns on Roselida. He dragged her here specifically to use her as a pawn against the Empress. Seeing the tension, the weary Emperor intervenes, giving his permission to end the silent power struggle. With a sly smile, Cashin justifies his actions to the emperor. He praises Roselida as an essential aide who helps manage the Winter Palace. Then, he drops a bombshell. If she were to quit, he'd have to return half of his royal duties. The threat is clear. Realizing the value of Cashin's heavy workload, the emperor caves. He permits Roselida to pay her respects, ending the tense standoff. She gives her formal greeting, and the emperor encourages her to keep assisting the prince, unknowingly trapping her further in Cashin's political games. Relieved she survived her debutante, Roselida worries about the empress's inevitable revenge. As they walk away, Cashin casually drops another bombshell. He gives her his official permission to refuse any summons from the empress. Roselida is stunned. A mere baron's daughter can't just ignore a royal command. But Cashin is firm, calling her his precious aide and promising to take full responsibility. He gently touches her hair, but Roselida feels a new anxiety. His political position is already so fragile, and she doesn't want to become another burden for him. Cashin leaves Roselida with a playful warning, telling her not to get charmed by anyone else. Once he's gone, her anxiety takes over. She's worried about the Empress's wrath, but assumes she has some time before a confrontation. Thinking she can finally relax, she takes a sip from her glass. But her peace is instantly shattered when a stern lady-in-waiting appears. The message is simple and terrifying. The Empress has summoned her. Roselida is completely floored. Revenge came way faster than she ever expected. Roselida is announced before the Empress, expecting the absolute worst. But instead of fury, she's met with a dazzling smile. The Empress thanks her warmly for coming, leaving Roselida completely bewildered. She was mentally preparing for a slap, not this bizarrely friendly welcome. The Empress tells her to relax, even placing a familiar hand on her shoulder. Then, the conversation takes a turn. She asks if it's true Roselida lives apart from her parents for work. Roselida cautiously confirms, sensing this is just the beginning of the interrogation. The Empress feigns sympathy, claiming her motherly heart ached hearing about Roselida's situation. She then makes an unbelievable offer. She wants to provide financial help to the Salas estate. Roselida is completely stunned by this unexpected kindness. Later, she's confronted by a smirking Cashin, who playfully asks if she enjoyed standing him up. He complains about waiting all alone, but Roselida fires back. She tells him he could have easily danced with any of the other ladies who were desperately vying for his attention. Cashin gently takes Roselida's hand, pressing a soft kiss to her glove. He declares that his first dance must be with her, especially since she went to all the trouble of dressing up so nicely. Roselida is instantly flustered. His smooth lines remind her of all the seductive things he said to the original heroine in the novel, making her blush against her will. Before she can protest, he confidently leads her onto the grand ballroom floor, sweeping her into the first dance of the evening as the music begins. As they dance, Cashin teases Roselida about her earlier comment, asking if it was a jab at his usual clothes. He then admits he actually finds her normal, simple outfits and loose hair quite cute. This unexpected compliment makes Roselida blush intensely. She thinks to herself that this version of Cashin is nothing like the prickly male lead from the novel. He's sly like a fox. Cutting through the moment, he asks if she's planning to work for the Empress. Shocked, Roselida asks how he knew, and he smugly replies that he has his ways. Roselida pulls her hand back, calling Cashin mean for thinking she was such an easy person to manipulate. She then exposes the Empress's entire scheme. If Roselida agreed to spy on him and leak his plans, her family's debts would be completely erased. Cashin's face hardens as he listens. He reveals that his stepmother has always blocked him from having an aide, while gifting his brother 5 of them. But then, a slight smile appears as he looks at Roselida, telling her that since she arrived, she has outshone every single one of them. Cashin continues, explaining that as Roselida proved her skills, the Emperor began trusting him with more important tasks. Roselida realizes the Empress was completely blindsided, never considering a lady from a minor family a threat. Cashin confirms this, stating she was simply outside his stepmother's calculations. He then looks at her intensely, admitting that he, however, saw her differently from the very beginning. As Roselida processes the shocking compliment, he tells her to take pride in her own competence. The dance ends, and he finally asks why she refused the Empress's tempting offer. Roselida hesitates, unable to tell him the real reason. She refused the Empress. The truth was just too embarrassing, The Empress had threatened to marry her off to a notoriously nasty and ugly nobleman. Roselida could just picture Cashin laughing his head off at her predicament. But he isn't laughing at all. Instead, his face turns cold and serious. He can't believe his stepmother would try to push someone so awful onto her. It's clear Cashin knows more than he lets on. As the party ends, their carriage waits outside in the snowy night. On the quiet carriage ride home, Roselida drifts off to sleep, her head coming to rest on Cashin's shoulder. She begins to dream of a younger, carefree Cashin surrounded by flowers. He smiles brightly and calls her Rose, whispering that she is still the only one for him. But another voice calls her name, pulling her from the dream. Roselida's eyes snap open, and she jolts upright in shock. She's leaning against the real Cashin. He calmly informs her that she's finally awake, guessing she must have been very tired. Still reeling from her bizarre dream about a younger Cashin, Roselida is snapped back to reality by his voice. He tells her they've arrived and that she should head inside. But before she can leave, he drops an unexpected bomb. Starting now, he's giving her the 3 days of leave she wanted. Roselida can barely contain her excitement, a real holiday. Waking up in her own bed, she basks in the feeling of a sweet, well-deserved break. For the next 3 days, her time is finally her own. Roselida stretches, ready for a perfect day off. She thinks about writing to her parents, visiting a bookstore, or maybe just rolling around in bed. But her lazy morning is shattered by a sudden knock at the door. Confused, she finds a messenger waiting for her. He apologizes for the intrusion and hands over an envelope with a wax seal. It's an invitation, formally requesting her presence at the Irenal family's luncheon tomorrow. Roselida's face drops in absolute horror. The Irenals are the family of that awful nobleman the Empress threatened to marry her to. Her day off is officially ruined. Roselida storms into Cashin's office, throwing the doors wide open with a dramatic flourish. He looks up from his mountain of paperwork, completely unfazed. He teases her, asking if she really came all the way to work on her day off just to get her bonus. Flustered, she mumbles that it's something like that, but Cashin sees right through her. He correctly deduces she's only here to reject the awful luncheon invitation. With a satisfied smirk, he tells her she did well and can use him as her shield anytime. Roselida shudders, realizing she just dodged a massive bullet. In the original story, that luncheon was a trap. The Empress used it to spread fake news, forcing the original Roselida into a miserable engagement with the Viscount's son. Looking back, she understands now that meeting the Empress was the start of all the heroine's suffering. Even when the original Cashin tried to step in and defend her, the Empress just shot him down, questioning why he would interfere in someone else's personal affairs. Roselida reflects on how useless the original Cashin was, rarely ever protecting the heroine. The current Cashin chimes in, mocking how little the Empress knows her taste. He lists her true passions: alcohol, meat, money, and shiny things. Roselida is floored by how well this sly fox reads her. She realizes she can't keep dodging these problems. Agreeing with his unspoken point, she forms a new plan. She'll use her authority and knowledge from the novel to expose the Viscount's entire family. A few days later, the scene shifts to the Irenal estate. At the Viscount's mansion, the Viscountess is absolutely livid. She fumes that a penniless baron's daughter dared to reject her invitation. She plots to force the marriage, planning to turn Roselida into a house servant while finding her son a proper mistress. To seal the deal, she'll send another invitation, this time with a threat backed by the Empress's name. Suddenly, a loud commotion erupts from the main hall. Before the Viscountess can react, Roselida herself strides in, flanked by imperial knights. The lady of the house is left sputtering in shock. Roselida calmly declares that a seizure and search warrant has been issued for the estate, directly by Cashin's order. The Viscountess explodes, questioning Roselida's sanity and reminding her of the marriage arrangement. But Roselida is unfazed, reading a list of their crimes: embezzlement, tax evasion, and even trade fraud. Stunned into silence, the Viscountess can only wonder how she knew. In a final, desperate attempt, she cries out, worried about what this investigation will do to her son, who serves as the first prince's aide. At the first prince's summer palace, the Viscount's son screams for Prince Charlie as he's dragged away by the knights. He cries that the situation is completely unfair, but his pleas go unanswered. The prince simply watches with an amused grin, remarking that Cashin is going to get him in trouble again. Cashin returns a smile, sarcastically suggesting his brother just hire a different aide. Annoyed, the prince complains his other aides nag too much. Uninterested in the petty problem, Cashin tells his brother to handle it himself and promptly takes his leave. Prince Charlie watches his brother leave, complaining about how cold Cashin is for ditching their meal. The prince then turns to his own aide and admits he's jealous, whining that he wants a pretty assistant, too. A few days later, Roselida is at her desk, reviewing official paperwork. The documents confirm the total downfall of her former pursuers. The Irenol Viscount family has been completely stripped of their noble title, their name permanently erased from the registry. Their attempt to trap her has led to their complete ruin. Roselida feels a wave of satisfaction. Reporting the trade fraud early was a genius move, unlike in the novel where it caused a huge mess. Plus, it landed the Empress in hot water with the Emperor. But her victory lap is cut short when she sees the newspaper. The headline screams that the devil of the Winter Palace saved the Empire, with a picture of her. She completely loses it, demanding to know why she got the title. Cashin just smirks, coolly suggesting the headline should have called them the devils instead. Roselida feels a wave of relief, convinced she can finally get some peace and quiet. But her hopes are instantly crushed by an unexpected visitor. A man with brown hair and a charming smile greets her, but she immediately recognizes those purple eyes. It's Cashin in disguise. He casually asks her out on a date, leaving her completely stunned. To seal the deal, he offers her triple pay for her time. When she complains about how unfair he is, he just smirks, claiming he's always sincere with her, leaving her utterly speechless. Roselida is thrilled that her problems are over, but her peace is short-lived. Cashin, wearing a brown-haired disguise, suddenly appears and offers to buy her anything she wants from the famous Saphir jewelry store. He then suavely asks her out on a date, leaving her completely flustered. She tells herself to calm down, trying to convince herself that she's only being swayed by the promise of expensive gifts. Despite her internal debate, she finds herself taking his outstretched hand, her cheeks blushing as he pulls her closer. Turns out Cashin's so-called date was actually work-related. Their mission was to go undercover as a married couple and inspect the central shopping district. Roselida tries to keep things professional, calling him Your Highness, but he immediately tells her that's not allowed. He smoothly reminds her of their cover story, and it finally clicks for her. Even though it's just an act, she gets completely flustered. She knows it's for work, but she still finds it impossible to casually call the Grand Duke by his first name. Roselida panics, sure she'll get arrested for insulting the royal family. But Cashin couldn't care less. He grabs her hand, pulling her attention back to him. For their undercover mission, he smoothly instructs her to call him by his alias, Ian. Roselida is totally thrown off. She's never heard that name before, which just makes this whole fake husband act feel even more bizarre. She's supposed to call the all-powerful Grand Duke by some random name, and the thought makes her head spin. The name Ian felt strangely familiar, but Roselida pushed the thought aside. She braced herself and finally called out to him using the alias. Trying to set some ground rules, she reminded him that she's been working hard and didn't want this mission to be too exhausting. Cashin was a little stung, thinking she really had a low opinion of him. He leaned in close, a smirk playing on his lips, and asked what they were doing today besides investigating the district. He didn't wait for her to answer, simply stating it was also a date. Before she could overthink it, Cashin leaned in with a charming smile. He suggested that instead of worrying, they should just enjoy shopping, casually calling her my wife. The title sent a jolt through Roselida. Despite knowing it was all a ruse, she couldn't help but get swept up in the moment. They strolled through the district, looking at pastries and browsing shops. He even surprised her with a teddy bear, and for a split second, she forgot it was all fake, a genuine smile gracing her face. Back in the carriage, Cashin questioned her choice. He asked if a single fountain pen was truly enough for her. Roselida beamed, confirming it was perfect. She explained that unlike the other extravagant gifts like watches or ceramics, which were just for decoration, this pen was something she could actually use. Her practical choice left Cashin stumped, and he admitted he could never quite figure her out. Privately, Roselida was relieved. She didn't want him to understand her too well. Still, he smiled, touched by her simple and humble decision. Cashin took her modest choice as a sign that she wanted to see him again. Roselida was floored, internally freaking out that she only picked one gift out of decency because everything cost a fortune. But seeing his soft expression, she felt her defenses melt. Maybe spending time with him wasn't so bad. He suggested they grab some food, and she eagerly agreed. Moments later in the carriage, however, confusion hit. As they drove away from the shopping area, she realized with horror that they had completely forgotten about the real reason they were there, the inspection. As they stood outside under the night sky, Cashin casually remarked that their work wasn't done yet. This flipped a switch for Roselida. She accused him of tricking her, pointing out he'd already ditched his disguise. They hadn't done any real work, just goofed off all day. Overcome with guilt, she declared she wouldn't accept payment. He simply asked why, explaining that he thought she would enjoy a day like this. Roselida was internally screaming. The gifts he'd given her were already worth several times her salary. When he asked if she didn't enjoy herself, she had to admit that wasn't the problem. Flustered, Roselida confessed that the problem was the exact opposite. The day had been too enjoyable. It didn't feel like work at all. With a soft smile, Cashin explained that was his intention. He just wanted to give her something other than work for a change. His sincerity left her speechless. He had already given her so much. Did he not realize it himself? Before she could react, he gently cupped her face. Leaning in, he placed a soft kiss on her cheek, leaving Roselida frozen in absolute, blushing shock. Cashin calmly told her the kiss was repayment for another time, leaving Roselida a blushing, confused mess. Her mind was spinning. He'd already bought her crazy expensive gifts. Was he taking their fake married couple act a little too seriously? Before she could process anything, he called her name and dropped an absolute bombshell. He casually asked if they should get engaged. Totally stunned, Roselida couldn't believe her ears, stammering out a weak "what?" With a confident smirk, Cashin repeated his shocking proposal, leaving her completely frozen. Totally reeling, Roselida's mind scrambles for an explanation. She blurts out, asking if he has a secret lover he's trying to impress. Was their whole day just practice for someone else? Her brain flips back to aid mode, and she asks when they should schedule this new task. But Cashin just says honestly, and gently takes her hand. He calmly states that he doesn't have a lover. He clarifies that he isn't asking about someone else, he's asking her. Looking straight at her, he declares he wants them to get engaged, leaving her utterly speechless. Still reeling from the sudden proposal, Roselida demands he explain what's happening. Cashin just smirks, teasingly asking if his attempt at a confession failed to make her heart flutter. Dismissing it as a joke, she tells him to get serious, though she secretly admits her heart did skip a beat. Dropping the act, Cashin agrees she's right. He reveals the truth. He needs a cover. His stepmother, the Empress, is trying to arrange a political marriage for him with a princess from the Allied Kingdom, and this fake engagement is his only way out. Roselida's mind reeled. She recalled this political marriage plot from the original novel, but it was happening way too soon. The story was going completely off the rails. She clarified his intentions, asking if he wanted a contractual engagement. He coolly confirmed her guess. As she started to protest, thinking about how complicated it would be to break it off, Cashin cut her off. He smoothly presented a document detailing an insane payment plan, offering a fortune in fees and bonuses just for her to act as his fiancé. The sheer amount of money left her totally stunned. Her mind raced. The money he offered could clear her family's debt 5 years ahead of schedule. Still, a fake engagement felt like a huge risk. Seeing her waver, Cashin turned on the charm, asking if the offer wasn't enough. He insisted that she was the only one who could save him from a situation. Backed into a corner, Roselida caved and reluctantly agreed. Pleased with her wise decision, Cashin immediately asked for her hand. Before she could react, he took it and slid a dazzling ring onto her finger, sealing their contract. Roselida stared at the impossibly sparkly ring now on her finger. With a smug grin, Cashin called it a shackle to keep her by his side, saying he looked forward to working with her. She was internally screaming, who gives a ring this expensive for a fake engagement? Before she knew it, their arrangement was made public. News of their engagement exploded across the capital. Newspaper headlines went wild, dramatically dubbing them the demons of the Winter Palace United and the strongest and worst couple, putting all major businesses on high alert. Cashin coolly remarked that the headlines were flashy, and Roselida agreed. Internally, though, she was fuming. Engagement news should be blissful, not disastrous. Still, she found a silver lining. In the novel, she was viciously slandered as a social climber. This time, the rumors were different. As she walked to work, she overheard people whispering that Cashin had forced her into it. It wasn't great, but it was better than being called a gold digger. Seeing Cashin waiting with a smile, she announced it was time to head inside. With the engagement now public, Cashin decided it was time to land another hit on his stepmother, the Empress. They arrived at the palace for a formal meeting with her and the Emperor. Just as he expected, the Empress was absolutely furious. She exploded, yelling that his actions were unacceptable. She demanded to know why he'd bypassed all procedures to announce an engagement in the papers. What enraged her most was his choice, a baron's daughter whose family was completely buried in debt, calling it a disgrace to the imperial family. The Empress continued her rant, yelling that this engagement insulted not just their family, but an entire allied kingdom. Just as she was really getting heated, the Emperor cut her off with a single, cold command to stop. He then dropped a bomb. He never planned to send Cashin away for a political marriage anyway. The Empress was stunned, trying to explain that her scheming was for Cashin's own good. But the Emperor didn't care. He stated firmly that he would not send Cashin, especially when another prince could go instead. The Emperor rebuked the Empress, telling her to restrain herself. He had a different plan for the allied kingdom. He would send the third prince instead. The Empress's face went pale with shock. As Roselida realized, this was a devastating blow. The third prince was the Empress's beloved biological son. Her entire scheme had backfired spectacularly. With a smug grin, Cashin sarcastically congratulated his stepmother. He remarked that she must be thrilled to have her own son chosen for such a fine position. The Empress stared at him, utterly defeated by his counterattack. With his victory secured, Cashin announced it was time to leave. He declared that since everything was settled and they had the Emperor's blessing, they should depart. After all, he said with a loving gaze, they were in the midst of their happiest days. As the heavy doors closed behind them, Roselida was in shock. She never imagined the Emperor would take their side so clearly and asked what he had done. Cashin smirked, explaining that he'd simply sent hundreds of pages of handover documents, proving just how indispensable he was to the Empire. Roselida's head throbbed just hearing about the mountain of paperwork. She questioned why he even needed a contract engagement if he could outplay his enemies so easily. But Cashin turned serious, revealing the real threat. A woman named Wilhelmina Lopez, the daughter of a powerful duke, was returning to the Empire. He asked if she now understood why their arrangement was so crucial. Roselida froze. She remembered that name all too well. Wilhelmina was the original story's Villainess, a woman whose jealous obsession with Cashin made her torment the heroine endlessly. Roselida's mind raced. Wilhelmina Lopez, the original story's Villainess. In the novel, she was the jealous woman who obsessively chased Cashin and tormented the heroine. Her family and the Empress had disapproved of her feelings, sending her to an academy abroad hoping she'd change. But Roselida knew that was a fool's hope. A girl like that never changes. Since she knew the future, she wasn't worried for herself. Instead, she calmly told Cashin that things were about to get very tough for him for a while. Cashin smugly asked if she now understood why their engagement was so critical. He then casually mentioned the name Wilma, causing Roselida to flinch. He smirked, questioning her strange reaction and innocently explaining it was just Wilhelmina's nickname. But Roselida's mind raced. The way he said it felt like he was talking directly to her, and she worried he might have figured something out. Then, Cashin delivered the final blow, revealing that Wilma was not only the Villainess's nickname, hinting at another shocking connection. Roselida's world stopped. Wilma wasn't just the Villainess's nickname, it was the alias she used when she met Cashin as a child. She had tried to avoid him, but their first meeting was a matter of life and death for him. To hide her identity, she disguised herself to look like Lady Wilhelmina. Now, her mind raced. There's no way he could have recognized her from back then, could he? As she stood frozen, Cashin turned around with a smirk, asking why she was staring at him with such a cute face. Internally screaming about how annoying Cashin is, Roselida tries to forget the incident. A few days later, she's back in work mode, delivering a political report. She informs Cashin that the Empress has been recklessly spending from the national treasury. But Cashin just smiles, explaining she's likely stressed over the third prince's upcoming marriage. With a wicked grin, he remarks that they should thank the Empress for giving them the perfect ammunition to use against her. He then hands Roselida a pile of documents, praising her work and sending her on her next task. Buried under a mountain of paperwork, Roselida felt like she was having the worst day ever. She sighed, accepting that leaving work on time was just a fantasy. As she walked down the grand hallway, a bright, high-pitched voice suddenly called out, asking her to stop for a moment. Roselida froze, recognizing the voice instantly. She turned to find the infamous Lady Wilhelmina, the novel's original villainess. Realizing she was already back, Roselida put on a polite face and asked how she could possibly help her. Wilhelmina flinched, offended by the question. She snapped back that she could never be lost, bragging that she knew the palace like the back of her hand. Roselida calmly apologized, explaining she only called out because she'd heard Wilhelmina had returned. Acting superior, Wilhelmina called Roselida rude, but decided to let it slide just this once. Internally, Roselida found the villainess surprisingly cute, but Wilhelmina grew suspicious, demanding to know how Roselida recognized her. With a pleasant smile, Roselida explained that everyone knew the famous Lady Lopez, adding that there was another reason, too. Roselida explained that she simply couldn't imagine anyone else with such lovely lilac hair. The sudden compliment left Wilhelmina completely flustered. Blushing furiously, she warned Roselida not to think that flattery would work on her. Internally, Roselida found the villainess adorable. Wilhelmina pointed a finger and declared she would never give up, telling Roselida to just wait and see before storming off. As she left, Roselida waved, amused that Wilhelmina forgot to mention what exactly she was fighting for. She remembered that even Wilhelmina's bullying was nothing compared to the Empress's cruelty. Roselida reflected that Wilhelmina's actions were just childish pranks, all stemming from a lack of love. In the novel, her family only saw her as a pawn for a political marriage. When she fell for Cashin, her reputation plummeted, ruining a potential engagement with the first prince. Having lost her value, she was framed by the Empress and exiled. Roselida found her fate tragic. She couldn't stand by and watch it happen again, vowing that this time, she would be the one to look out for Wilhelmina. Despite her vow to look out for Wilhelmina, Roselida's plan was backfiring. She found herself constantly fussing over the other girl, but every kind gesture was met with suspicion. When Roselida invited her to share a meal, a flustered Wilhelmina insisted she wasn't lonely before bolting. The nicer Roselida was, the more she was avoided. Her thoughts were interrupted by Cashin, who suddenly declared he was feeling jealous. He'd heard she was paying a lot of attention to Lady Wilhelmina, and he thought she should be focused on him instead. Roselida dismissed Cashin's jealousy, thinking that forcing compliments was just harassment. Besides, Wilhelmina was actually cute. She wasn't expecting the girl to understand her kindness, but what happened next at the banquet left her speechless. As a glass of wine was thrown in her direction, Wilhelmina suddenly leaped in front, taking the hit herself. The crowd gasped at the shocking display. Roselida could only stare in utter disbelief, her mind completely blank. She was utterly baffled as to why the story's villainess had just protected her. The crowd erupted in whispers as Wilhelmina stood shaking, her purple dress soaked with red wine. To figure it out, we have to go back a few hours to the start of the royal banquet. It was a welcoming party for a princess, and Roselida had arrived with Cashin at her side. This time, Roselida arrived at the grand banquet on Cashin's arm, not as a baron's daughter, but as his official fiancée. She couldn't help but notice how extravagant everything was, from her dress to the sparkling jewels. The power of her new title was immense. But her good mood soured when Cashin asked why she looked so upset. She silently fumed, recalling their contract. He was supposed to provide her with items to use as his fiancée. So why on earth was she wearing the priceless necklace that once belonged to his mother, the late Empress? Roselida told him to stop being absurd, but Cashin insisted he was serious. He claimed his late mother, the Empress, would have wanted her to have the necklace. Roselida was stunned, her mind racing to figure out his true motive. She couldn't get caught in his web, deciding she was only borrowing the precious item until their contract ended. Cashin called her harsh before revealing their real mission for the night, splitting up to gather intel on the nobles. After agreeing, Roselida found herself standing alone and on edge in the middle of the grand ballroom. Her mission was a total bust. With her reputation as the demon of the Winter Palace, every noble in the room was actively avoiding her. Getting intel was proving impossible when no one would even get close. Just as she was about to give up, another noble lady approached with a glass, calling out her name. But before Roselida could react, a hand shot out and smacked the cup. The entire drink went flying, splashing not onto her, but directly onto Wilhelmina, who had suddenly appeared in front of her. Roselida stared, completely stunned. Dripping wet, Wilhelmina demanded an explanation. The smug noblewoman stammered, admitting she was only trying to teach Roselida a lesson about her place. Wilhelmina's expression turned to ice. She coldly reminded the woman that this was a party for distinguished guests. If a count's daughter felt she could school a baron's daughter, then Wilhelmina, a duke's daughter, would do the same. She picked up a full glass of wine and, in one swift motion, gave the woman a taste of her own medicine right across the face. The disgraced noblewoman stood there in total shock, wine dripping down her face. But Wilhelmina wasn't finished with her power move. Ignoring the now silent bully, she suddenly grabbed a stunned Roselida by the arm. Before our girl could even ask what was going on, Wilhelmina started dragging her away from the scene. The original aggressor collapsed to the floor in a humiliated heap as the crowd just stared. Caught in the whirlwind, Roselida was helplessly pulled along, wondering where in the world she was going now. Wilhelmina dragged Roselida down a quiet hallway, looking totally drained from the ordeal. Roselida, however, was incredibly touched. She knew Wilhelmina was the novel's main villainess, usually acting cute but distant. But just now, she'd shown a surprisingly cool and charismatic side. Roselida couldn't believe she'd gone so far just for her. Finding her voice, she sincerely thanked Wilhelmina for saving her from trouble. Stunned by the genuine gratitude, Wilhelmina froze. Her eyes widened in shock, and then, to Roselida's complete confusion, they began to fill with tears. Brushing off the thanks, Wilhelmina told Roselida there was no need for repayment. But then, she nervously suggested that if Roselida was truly grateful, they should have tea together. She even pulled the power card, reminding Roselida that as Cashin's fiancée, she couldn't refuse. Happy to get closer to the novel's villainess, Roselida eagerly agreed. Unfortunately, she was later swamped with an insane amount of work and had to miss the tea party, leaving her totally depressed. This sudden workload was all because Princess Alexis had arrived early to prepare for her state marriage. The diplomatic preparations were a total nightmare, leaving Roselida completely drained. She was so swamped, she couldn't even find time for lunch. As she hurried through the palace, a voice suddenly called out, telling her to wait. Roselida turned and, to her surprise, it was Princess Alexis. The princess correctly identified her as the second prince's fiancée. Seeing her out at this hour, Alexis gave a charming wink and invited her to lunch. Stunned by the sudden proposal, Roselida was speechless. Next thing she knew, she was sitting opposite the princess inside the third prince's palace. Princess Alexis asked how Roselida was enjoying the meal. Playing it safe, Roselida praised the third prince's palace, saying it was beautiful. Alexis flashed a knowing smile, agreeing that such beauty suited Roselida perfectly. Completely confused by the odd compliment, Roselida asked what she meant. The princess leaned in, smugly revealing she had already investigated her. She then dropped a bombshell. She believed Cashin was so bewitched by Roselida's beauty that he was forced to propose. Roselida was left speechless, wondering what kind of wild rumor this was. Roselida stammers that it's a total misunderstanding, but Princess Alexis isn't buying it. The princess lays it out plain and simple. If Cashin wasn't completely mesmerized by her face, why else would he get engaged to the daughter of a broke, ruined family? Put on the spot, Roselida proudly declares it was because of her skills and capabilities. The princess scoffs, clearly unconvinced. Changing tactics, she invites Roselida to go with her somewhere. Before Roselida can even process where they're going, they arrive at the Winter Palace, just as Cashin is announced. Princess Alexis greeted Cashin with a huge smile, boldly asking to borrow Lady Roselida. Roselida was completely floored, while Cashin's face immediately darkened. Reading the formal request, he muttered that it seemed his fiancée had charmed someone else. Suddenly, he stood and strode towards them. Before Roselida could even react, he swiftly pulled her into his arms. Leaning in close, he questioned what he was supposed to do to keep her all to himself. Completely flustered by the possessive display, Roselida could only call him unfair. Flustered, Roselida reminds herself to play the part of a loving fiancé since the princess is watching. Seeing their display, Princess Alexis laughs, saying she feels like a villain. She clarifies she isn't trying to steal his fiancé, but then makes a bold proposal. They should switch aides for a month. The princess explains you can judge a person's character by how they treat those closest to them. Taking Cashin's stunned silence as agreement, she announces she'll pick Roselida up tomorrow and promptly leaves the room. The aides swap officially began, and Roselida was already filled with regret. Working for the princess was anything but easy, all thanks to one of her other aides, young Lord Gash. He constantly picked petty fights, accidentally knocking over an inkwell and then blaming her for the mess. Roselida knew he was doing it on purpose. Apparently, Lord Gash had a huge crush on the original Roselida and once saw her sharing a tender moment with Cashin. Now, he's taking all his jealous frustration out on her. Meanwhile, on Cashin's side of the aide swap, things were just as rough. His temporary aide, Wilhelmina, thought he looked completely exhausted. Later, when Roselida visited him, Cashin thanked her for coming despite her own hard time. She replied that she simply wanted to get ahead on work and earn extra pay. With a soft smile, Cashin suddenly rose from his desk and walked toward her. He gently took her wrist, asking to see her arm for a moment. Roselida was left completely baffled by his sudden, strange request. Roselida realized the bracelet on her wrist was magical, which was why she'd been so exhausted. Cashin's intuition was scary sharp. He'd already noticed she was tired and asked what was wrong. Roselida finally admitted that Lord Gash was making her life difficult. Cashin wasn't surprised, but he warned her it would only get worse. He then dropped a bombshell. Gash recently had a secret meeting with the Empress. His ultimate goal is to become the princess's consort, and he's using the Empress to get there. Roselida just deadpanned, remembering the princess's type, pretty and dumb. Roselida bluntly told Cashin that if he were engaged to the princess, he'd be dumped in no time. With a smug grin, Cashin replied that he always considered himself rather pretty. He leaned in close, backing her into her chair and asking if she didn't agree. Completely flustered by his face being so near, Roselida stammered that he was, of course, very handsome. Before she could process her own words, Cashin smirked, gently held her chin, and planted a soft kiss on her cheek, leaving Roselida completely frozen in shock. As Cashin pulled away, he cheekily declared that since Rose liked pretty things, he'd have to try even harder. He gave her a confident wave, telling her he was counting on her as his fiancée from now on. Still reeling, Roselida simply agreed. The next day at Dawn Palace, she was walking down a hall when a sharp voice ordered her to stop. It was Lord Gash, blocking her path with Wilhelmina at his side. Roselida's eyes hardened. Cashin's warning was coming true. Composing herself, she calmly asked what he wanted. Lord Gash angrily accused Roselida of playing innocent, claiming she snuck off to Cashin every night to spill the kingdom's secrets. But Roselida just smirked, realizing this was the Empress's handiwork. She completely flipped the script, calmly asking if he wasn't the one meeting secretly with the Empress. Gash was totally floored. She then wondered aloud how Princess Alexis would feel about his backroom deals. The threat worked instantly. Gash fell to his knees, begging her to keep quiet. But with a sly smile, Roselida decided she couldn't just let his threats slide. As Lord Gash fled, Roselida reflected on the situation. His foolish accusation had nearly caused a major international incident. Just then, a voice from a nearby doorway asked if she had heard everything. It was Prince Charlie, and he confirmed he had been listening the entire time. He praised her impressive skills, saying she truly lived up to her title as Cashin's aide. Suddenly, Princess Alexis appeared with a sly grin. She looked at Roselida with newfound respect and asked if her next target was the Empress. Princess Alexis smirked, cutting straight to the point. She asked Roselida if her next target was the Empress. The princess explained her ruthless philosophy. When an enemy reveals their weakness, you grab it and don't let go. She wanted intel on both her future mother-in-law and Lord Gash, planning to take them down together. Promising a satisfying reward, she waited for an answer. Roselida accepted the deal, unnerved by how the princess's intense eyes were just like Cashin's, and just as terrifying. Lord Gash anxiously met with a mysterious hooded figure, furious at being summoned. Realizing it was the Empress, he apologized and got straight to the point. Princess Alexis was about to discover their secret deal. The Empress, completely unfazed, coolly asked if there was any proof of their meeting. Remembering Roselida's warning about her shamelessness, Gash revealed his trump card. He presented a hairpin, explaining that a servant had witnessed everything and was preparing to report it. The tables had suddenly turned, and now he held all the power. Lord Gash laid his trap, claiming the witness not only saw them but heard the Empress order him to get rid of Roselida. He then presented his final piece of evidence, a magic device that had supposedly recorded their entire conversation. Furious and cornered, the Empress demanded to know what he wanted. Gash celebrated internally. This was exactly the reaction Roselida had predicted. In a flashback, she explained her plan: bluff the Empress into a panic, then record her desperate reaction to get real proof, creating mutual leverage. Gash, however, secretly planned to betray Roselida and keep the power for himself. Lord Gash offered to personally handle Roselida and the servant. In return, he reminded the Empress of her promise to make him Princess Alexis's consort. Just as she reluctantly agreed, a furious voice cut through the night, asking what she meant. To their horror, the third prince and Princess Alexis emerged from the bushes, having heard everything. The prince angrily confronted his mother for interfering, catching her red-handed trying to arrange partners behind his back. As he yelled that Alexis should love only him, the panicked Empress clapped a hand over his mouth. Suddenly, another man steps from the shadows, silencing everyone. He tells Lord Gash that while he found his little performance endearing, such behavior is unacceptable. He then reveals a magic recording device, the real one. Gash's face drains of color, realizing that Devil Roselida had played him perfectly. Taking charge, the newcomer casually grabs the stunned third prince, suggesting the four of them continue their messy chat somewhere more private. Watching from a distance, Roselida wishes the prince had revealed even more of the Empress's dirty secrets. Leaning in close, Cashin teases Roselida, calling it a shame and remarking that she asks for a lot. Unbothered, she simply claims to value efficiency. She warns him that rushing can ruin everything, but Cashin flips her words back on her, asking if she remembers giving him that same advice. Roselida is stunned, not recalling it at all. He then drops a bombshell. This temple is where the Empress has been hiding her secret assets. He admits he's been looking for a way to expose it, assuming Princess Alexis has been investigating as well. Cashin smirks, revealing his master plan. By exposing this secret location, the Empress will be so on edge that she's bound to make a mistake. Roselida agrees, adding that with Princess Alexis now involved, they can hit the Empress from multiple angles. Impressed, Cashin asks when she planned all this, realizing she even predicted his move against Lord Gash. Roselida admits her scheme began the moment Alexis took her away. She explains that the kind princess was the perfect shield, and now the first prince will become her sword. Suddenly, Roselida's face flushes with frustration. She demands to know why he kept her in the dark, pointing out that she always reports every little thing to him. With a pained look, she realizes she was the only one who thought they were true partners sharing everything. Hearing this, Cashin quietly apologizes. He then pulls her into a sudden, tight embrace. He explains that he just wanted her to have a small break from their dangerous games, knowing that unlike the princess, he can never offer her a real place to rest. Still in his arms, Roselida insists she's not weak enough for him to worry about. She reminds him that he hired her because he needs her by his side, so he should trust her to handle things. Cashin's serious expression cracks into a grin. He teasingly asks if this means she's going to take responsibility for him for the rest of his life. Roselida is left completely speechless by his joke. After their plan is set, everything goes smoothly. Lord Gash is promptly sent back home, and the Empress finally faces consequences for her shady dealings. With their aides stressing out, Cashin slides a sealed red envelope toward Roselida, declaring it's for her. Confused, she asks what he means, but Wilhelmina chimes in, reminding her that she promised the reward wouldn't be disappointing. Roselida stammers, saying she thought the detailed report on the Empress's downfall was her reward. Wilhelmina just smiles and urges her to open it. Breaking the seal, Roselida peeks inside. Her eyes widen in total shock as a golden light shines from the document, leaving her completely stunned by its contents. Cashin watches with a stern expression, pointing out how happy Roselida seems. Gushing over the gift, she can't help but admire Princess Alexis's incredible taste. The envelope contained a voucher for a month's stay, a lease for a building in the capital, and a painting of the beautiful property. As she daydreams about living there, Cashin's cold voice cuts in. He notes that she looks ready to leave right this second, adding that the princess must really covet her. Panicked, Roselida realizes her excitement about a potential escape was far too obvious. Seeing his possessive reaction, Roselida decides to tease him. She claims living in a pretty place is her lifelong dream, and she would leave for the kingdom immediately if she could. Cashin's expression darkens as he corners her, asking if she's really thinking of leaving him behind. Flustered, she quickly backpedals, telling him to stop pretending to be worried. But he just grabs her arm, his smirk returning. He tells her she truly doesn't know him, all while thinking to himself just how much he actually wants her. As Cashin stares her down, Rosalida's mind races. She tells herself he's just messing with her like always, but something feels different. This time, he seems genuinely sad. Trying to break the heavy tension, she asks where he thinks she would possibly go. To lighten the mood, she cheerfully points at him and declares her precious salary is right there. A smirk plays on his lips as he agrees, adding that everything she loves is right there with him. Flustered, Rosalida just agrees, mentally exhausted from trying to keep up. Cashin suddenly lays out the political minefield they just entered. He explains that the Anton Kingdom, Princess Alexis's home, is famous for its art exhibitions. With her royal wedding now finalized, the Empire is eager to secure the hosting rights. But there's one major problem. The Empress is also aggressively pursuing those same rights. In a shocking move, Princess Alexis bypassed everyone and gave the exclusive rights directly to Cashin and Rosalida. Rosalida panics, realizing this is a blatant attempt to start a war between them and the Empress. Overwhelmed with dread, Rosalida asks if the Empress will definitely try to pull something on them. But Cashin steps in front of her, vowing to act as her shield this time. He refuses to put her in danger, explaining the Empress is already furious over a recent political maneuver involving her son. He then reveals that Princess Alexis's stunt was a direct declaration of war on him over Rosalida. Smirking, Cashin says he now has to prove his affection for her. And just as they expected, an invitation arrives for dinner with the Empress that night. At the tense dinner with the Emperor and Empress, Rosalida cuts straight to the point, guessing they were summoned because of the exhibition rights. The Emperor confirms he heard the news, noting how close Cashin and Princess Alexis seem to have become. Cashin plays it cool, explaining they simply became acquainted. He then lands a devastating verbal jab, claiming the princess entrusted the priceless exhibits to him because he's the person she trusts most. Twisting the knife, he praises her excellent judgment, sending the Empress into a silent, seething rage. The Empress slams her hand down, cutting Cashin off. She feigns concern, arguing that while he's a great warrior, he knows nothing about managing delicate art. What if a mistake happens? She graciously offers to help him, reminding everyone that her maiden family has vast experience in the art world. Cashin eyes her suspiciously, questioning her sudden generosity. Playing the part of a caring mother, the Empress insists she's only making the suggestion out of genuine concern. But Rosalida sees the truth behind her sweet smile. It's a blatant move to steal control. Rosalida instantly sees the Empress's scheme. She wants to funnel the exhibition rights to her maiden family. But Cashin just puts his knife down and flashes a wicked smile. He sarcastically declares himself deeply honored by her concern. Later, back in their office, Rosalida is fuming. She can't believe the Empress so boldly extorted the rights from him right in front of the Emperor. Worried, she admits the Empress seems even more venomous than usual. Noticing her distress, Cashin simply turns and asks if she's really that worried about him. Flustered, Rosalida insists that of course she's worried. How could she not be, when he's the one spearheading the whole project? Cashin stares at her, his intense purple gaze unwavering as he thinks about how special she truly is. But the tender moment shatters in an instant. He abruptly turns away, adjusting his cuffs and declaring he's a bit tired, leaving Rosalida stunned by his sudden coldness. As he walks away, he silently reminds himself that his duty is to one day return her safely to her family's estate. Alone in his office, Cashin grapples with his feelings. He admits that on draining days like today, he desperately wants to keep Rosalida by his side and lean on her. She doesn't know how dangerous the Empress truly is, or how much he wants to protect everything from breaking. A brief memory flashes through his mind, a kind girl from his past. Because of this, he clenches his fist, hardening his resolve. For her sake, he must hold back his growing feelings. The next day, Cashin and Rosalida prepare to depart from the Winter Palace. He turns to her, a small smile on his face as he tells her she looks beautiful. Not missing a beat, Rosalida looks back at him with fierce determination. She confirms that she does, explaining that today, she isn't just his aide. For this crucial meeting, she will be confronting their political rival as his official fiancé and the future crown princess. Their destination, a meeting with Duke Jamodi, the Empress's intimidating elder brother. As they step into the meeting, Roselida steels herself, knowing Duke Jamodi is a truly ruthless man. The Duke offers a stiff bow, greeting Prince Cashin before his gaze lands on Roselida with a condescending smirk. He wastes no time with insults, snidely remarking that Cashin must be trying to give the future crown princess some refinement, a necessary step for a lady who never even had a debutante ball. Roselida isn't surprised. She knows the Duke is a stuffy noble who has long hated Cashin and would pick a fight immediately. Roselida fires back with a confident smile, correcting the Duke. She actually made her debut at the Imperial Ball last year and asks if the Empress simply forgot to mention it. When he huffs that he wasn't speaking to her, Roselida explains that she's answering because his job wasn't worth the prince's time. Backed into a corner, the Duke quickly changes the subject, leading them into the gallery to inspect the treasures. Ignoring the fuming man, Cashin sweetly pulls Roselida closer and asks if her feet are hurting at all. With the fuming Duke watching, Cashin offers to carry Roselida if she gets tired. The Duke finally snaps, demanding the prince take the inspection seriously. But Cashin coolly replies that he thought the Empress sent the Duke to guide them on a relaxing date. He then teases Roselida for being too focused, guessing she doesn't trust their host. Roselida admits it, revealing she read a court file about the Duke's son who ran away because his work was too hard. Flustered and exposed, the Duke stammers that he had his reasons. Roselida continues their act, sweetly praising Cashin for his meticulous nature. This is the last straw for Duke Jamodi. He finally snaps, telling them to just enjoy their date while he handles the inspection perfectly himself. As the Duke stomps away, Cashin smugly tells him to do a good job, so Roselida won't have to fix his work. Once they're alone, Cashin tells Roselida she can relax. Later, they meet the Duke again. Cashin immediately puts him on the spot, demanding to hear his report. The Duke is floored, stammering that he needs more time. With the Duke stammering, Cashin simply calls Roselida's name. She steps forward to deliver her report, rattling off a flawless and detailed inspection. She identifies faulty display cases, humidity-sensitive items that need relocating, and treasures that should be grouped together. The Duke is left absolutely speechless. Cashin casually twists the knife, finding it odd since the Empress swore the Duke would do a much better job. Cornered and humiliated, the Duke furiously accuses Roselida of inspecting everything beforehand just to show him up with dirty tricks. Roselida calmly counters the Duke's outburst. She notes that she heard him address the first prince's fiancée as prospective crown princess. Suddenly, Cashin grabs the Duke by the collar, his expression turning cold. He asks if the man intended to slight both him and his fiancée by not using the proper title for Roselida. The terrified Duke stammers that the other lady is from a reputable house and already had her formal ceremony. Listening quietly, Roselida realizes what he's implying. A new voice cuts in, asking the Duke if his standards now outweigh the Emperor's approval. Everyone turns in shock to find First Prince Charlie standing there with a smile. The Duke pales, stammering the prince's name in disbelief. Cashin asks his brother what brings him here. Charlie explains their mother arranged a lunch with the Duke, but he'd much rather spend his time with Cashin and Lady Salis. Taking Roselida's hand for a kiss, he makes his interest clear, causing Cashin's expression to harden immediately. Prince Charlie smiles, telling Roselida he's pleased about her engagement to Cashin. A nervous Roselida warns that his own fiancé might not like hearing that. Suddenly, Cashin yanks her back, pulling her away from his brother's grasp. He coldly informs Charlie that his fiancé is the one who might get upset. Unfazed, the prince doubts it. As Cashin leads her away, Charlie leans in and whispers that Cashin is incredibly jealous, but she shouldn't worry about it. He then strolls off with a smirk. With a playful finger heart, Prince Charlie promises to support their love. He waves a cheerful goodbye and vanishes as quickly as he appeared, leaving Roselida to think he's a complete whirlwind. Though confused by the chaos, she figures the prince is on their side. Just then, Cashin gently takes her hand, telling her not to waste her thoughts on his brother. As he dismisses the prince, Roselida looks at him and realizes his words are dripping with jealousy. Elsewhere, the Empress has tea with her brother and Prince Charlie. Her brother slams his fist on the table, seething with anger. He complains about Roselita's infuriating arrogance, shocked that someone so far beneath them has such nerve. The Empress calmly tells him to endure it for their future plans. With a sly look, she notes that Charlie played his part perfectly. Her brother agrees, realizing a powerless girl clinging to a prince actually benefits them. Having served his purpose, the Empress coolly dismisses the prince from their table. Prince Charlie plays the part of the obedient son, but the second he's alone, he lets out a frustrated sigh. Back at the table, the Empress's friendly facade melts away. She asks her brother if he's checked on the item. With his confirmation, her expression turns to disgust. She complains about the insolence of low-born pests and declares they cannot fail. She vows that Cashin, the son of her rival, will never take the throne. Her brother agrees, thinking they must strike while their enemies are caught off guard. The Empress's brother declares that everything is going according to their plan and they will slowly tighten the trap. A few days later, the exhibition begins with a dazzling firework display. Amidst the crowd of nobles, the Emperor approaches Cashin and Roselita, complimenting them on their hard work. Cashin humbly replies they simply did their best with the kingdom's resources. The Emperor then acknowledges the Empress's efforts. With a sly smile, she downplays her involvement, saying she only offered a few suggestions and that Cashin was responsible for the majority of the work. The Empress's brother remarks that Cashin had come by to inspect the storage a few times. Roselita overhears, instantly suspicious of his real motives. She pushes her doubts aside and begins the tour for the royal family, presenting a sculpture made from a rare, glowing mineral. As the piece shines, the Empress is struck with a sudden, strange feeling of unease. Her brother notices her disturbed expression and asks what's wrong. Touching her face, she admits that something just feels terribly off, though she can't quite place the feeling. Roselita realizes the Empress and her brother are finally making their move. The Empress remarks that the mineral looks familiar, and her brother confirms they have some at their estate. As Cashin presses her about her unease, she suddenly turns to the crowd with a malicious grin. She announces the sculpture is made of wetted stone, a rare mineral that only shines when placed next to its counterpart, the sacred stone. She then points at the dull sculpture, declaring that since it isn't glowing, the kingdom must have failed to send the complete set. The crowd erupted in whispers. For the allied kingdom to send only half of a precious set was a direct insult to the empire, especially after all their diplomatic efforts. As the emperor's face darkened with anger, the Empress's brother stepped forward. He claimed that when he first inspected the delivery, the sculpture was shining brilliantly. Then, with a malicious grin, he turned and pointed directly at Cashin. He accused the prince of being careless with his duties, roaring that he had allowed the priceless sacred stone to be stolen. The emperor's face contorted with fury as he demanded to know if the accusation was true. With all eyes on him, Cashin paused for a tense moment before calmly admitting that the sacred stone had indeed been stolen. A wave of shock rippled through the room. But just as the Empress and her brother exchanged triumphant glances, Cashin's expression twisted into a smirk. He clarified that the thieves had only managed to steal the fake. The conspirators froze, stammering in disbelief. Cashin then began his explanation, recalling a warning from Roselita 6 days prior about a suspicious intruder targeting the exhibition. Roselita had warned him about a suspicious intruder just days before the event. She explained that while guards managed to drive the thief off, they couldn't catch them. This immediately set off alarms. The exhibition's location in the annex was supposed to be a secret, not information some random person should have. Realizing the sloppy attempt meant the culprit was desperate, Cashin knew they couldn't just wait for another attack. Acting on her warning, they prepared a counterfeit stone. The thief fell right into their trap, stealing the fake instead of the real one. Cashin turns the tables with a look of pure disappointment. He apologizes for keeping them in the dark, explaining it was necessary to catch the culprit. Then, he lays it on thick, feigning hurt feelings. He tells his stepmother that since she was so concerned, he assumed she'd speak to him privately, not accuse him in front of everyone. Looking wounded, he admits their public display of distrust is disheartening. The emperor immediately scolds the Empress's brother for being so rash. In a panic, the brother insists they can't be sure Cashin is telling the truth. The emperor's gaze sharpened. He twisted the accusation around, asking the Empress's brother if he was accusing the crown prince of being negligent. The brother froze, stammering that it wasn't what he meant. He'd walked right into the trap. The Empress seethed silently, furious at her brother's blunder. Seeing his opening, The Emperor shut the matter down. He warned Cashin to make sure it never happens again, then dismissed the topic. Standing side by side, Cashin and Roselita simply smiled and agreed, having perfectly navigated the political attack. Furious, the Empress strikes her brother across the face. She seethes, asking if he's out of his mind for botching the job and talking back. He offers a weak apology, claiming he didn't anticipate the increased security. This only enrages her further, since the Emperor ended up praising Cashin. Meanwhile, Lord Gash marvels at the flawlessly organized exhibition. He compliments Roselita's diligent work, and Cashin agrees, adding he also played a part. The Lord smiles, remarking that having a capable aide proves Cashin's own ability. The Emperor proudly declares Cashin is truly his son. This praise sends the Empress into a silent, trembling rage. She grits her teeth, furious that she ever gave him the chance to recover. Staring out at the storm, she thinks bitterly about how the one who should have been gone forever had returned alive. Elsewhere, Lord Gash recalls that it's been about 10 years since Cashin's first expedition. He remembers that fateful time as the very moment when everything in the Empire began to change. Back in the office, Roselita couldn't believe her ears, asking what he'd just said. Cashin calmly repeated his shocking announcement. He was planning to give her a 9-day vacation. The words just didn't compute. A break? From this guy? He explained that he'd actually wanted to give her time off for a while, but the timing was never right. Now that the exhibition was a success, and the first half of the year's schedule was complete, her workload had finally decreased enough for a proper rest. Cashin asks why she looks so worried, thinking she'd be eager for a break. He promises he can manage things alone for a week. Roselita hesitates before admitting she's concerned he'll overwork himself if she leaves. Her genuine care catches him completely off guard. A tender expression softens his features as he thinks that's exactly what he wanted to say to her. Gently touching her cheek, he tells her not to worry and just get some rest, inwardly calling her his precious aide. As Roselita blushes, she finds it funny how the simple word, aide, now feels more endearing than any of the fancy titles he'd used before. And so, her first ever 9-day vacation officially starts. For 2 whole days, she does absolutely nothing but lounge in her room, reading and snacking. But her peaceful break is shattered on the 3rd day. A furious young lady with purple hair bursts in, shocked that the second prince's aide is just lazing around at home instead of working. The rude intruder is actually a princess. She whisks Roselita away to a stunning private villa just for her vacation. Roselita is completely blown away, gushing about how incredible the place is. The princess, flustered but pleased, explains she wanted to make Roselita's time off special since she works so hard. Internally calling her an angel, Roselita eagerly accepts the princess's offer to explore a nearby village together. And just like that, her relaxing vacation turns into a surprise girls' trip as they head into the charming town. After a refreshing walk, Roselita and the princess settle in for a lovely tea time. Roselita is beaming, gushing about how she's having a wonderful vacation thanks to her new friend. The princess gets flustered, dismissing the praise before shyly asking if they can be considered friends now. She insists Roselita call her by her nickname, Walma. Finding this absolutely adorable, Roselita agrees. Now on a first-name basis, Walma suggests they go out for a delicious brunch she knows. Roselita is all in, excited for another adventure with her new bestie. Roselita is on cloud 9, gushing internally about this dreamlike vacation with her new friend. This perfect moment feels like a fantasy she never wants to end. But her happy bubble bursts when she looks up and sees a familiar face. Standing right there is none other than Prince Cashin. Roselita freezes, horrified at running into her boss during her time off. Her panic skyrockets as she realizes the bigger problem. She absolutely cannot let them meet.
Why?
Because her new bestie, Walma, has a massive crush on him. Cashin smoothly greets her as Princess Wilhelmina, noting it's been a while. To Roselita's shock, Walma doesn't blush or get flustered at all. Instead, she's perfectly composed, calmly asking him what brings him here. Roselita is baffled by her friend's cool reaction, totally expecting her to fangirl. Cashin claims it's official business, but adds that it's after hours. With a sly smile, he turns to Walma and asks if he can borrow Rose for a moment, his hand moving towards Roselita's waist. Before Roselita can stop him, Walma calmly steps in. She states that she also had plans with Roselita, but Cashin just smiles, pulling his trump card. He points out that as Rose's fiancé, his request isn't out of line. The air grows tense as Walma challenges him, asking if a fiancé really takes precedence over a friend. An unspoken battle of wills ignites between them, their glares clashing like swords. Caught in the middle, a bewildered Roselida has no idea what is going on. Seeing how flustered Roselida is, Walma asks if something happened. Roselida stammers, struggling to explain the complicated situation with Cashin. But her friend is incredibly perceptive. Walma tells her not to worry, guessing it must be work-related. Relieved that she doesn't have to lie, Roselida thanks her. Not wanting to get in the way, Walma decides to head back to the capital first. She gently takes Roselida's hands, telling her to take care of herself. Roselida promises she will, wishing her friend a safe trip back home. As Wilhelmina's carriage rumbles down the road, Roselida waves her friend goodbye. The moment she's gone, however, a sudden weakness hits Roselida like a tidal wave. Her body goes completely limp, and she collapses to the ground, calling out Cashin's name in a desperate whisper. Meanwhile, on her way back, Wilhelmina tries to shake off a bad feeling. She reassures herself that Cashin is a sly fox. Even if something happened, he would have found a way to get out of it. She's sure it's nothing serious. But Walma's bad feeling was dead on. Far from being fine, Cashin is in a world of trouble. In a dark, deserted alley, he stumbles, his pristine white shirt now soaked in red. He collapses to the ground, barely managing to stay conscious. Clutching a glowing wound on his chest, he pants that the basic treatment from his magic kit will have to be enough. But sitting in a growing pool of his own blood, it's painfully obvious that this injury is far from basic. He's seriously hurt. Cashin dismisses his wounds as the result of an unexpected ambush. But his biggest concern isn't the pain, it's the thought of Roselida worrying about him. His mind drifts back to their childhood, recalling a time he taught her to always have an escape plan. He fondly remembers when she struggled to say his name, simply calling him Mian. As he gets lost in this warm memory, a tiny voice in his head, sounding just like her, snaps at him to stop reminiscing because he's not dying yet. Snapping out of his haze, Cashin tells himself it's not his time to die. He forces a faint smile, clinging to consciousness. Just then, the sound of frantic footsteps shatters the silence of the alley. Roselida appears, her face a mask of terror as she screams his title. Seeing her so panicked, Cashin musters a weak grin, asking how he could possibly check out looking this messy. She rushes to his side, and he gently tells her not to make such a worried face, trying to ease her fears despite his own grave condition. Roselida fires back, asking how she's supposed to stay calm when he's covered in wounds and burning with fever. She wonders just how hard he pushed himself while he was alone. Too weak to argue, Cashin weakly tells her to be quiet and focus on resting. Taking over, Roselida promises to handle it from here. The last of his energy drains away, and he slumps against her, finally unconscious. Holding him tightly, Roselida whispers that he's done well, trying to soothe him even as he's passed out. While Cashin recovers, Roselida examines documents confiscated from the mages. The words on the scroll leave her completely stunned. Later, in a quiet country hideout, Cashin finally wakes up. He finds Roselida smiling warmly at him, a bowl of stew in her hands. The tender moment triggers a flashback to their childhood, when she nervously cooked for him. Back then, a young Cashin didn't care about the taste. He was just happy because she had made it for him. The sweet memory makes her pause, lost in thought. The moment reminds Roselida of their childhood when, disguised as Wilma, she fed him in a similar shabby room. She remarks that he's never been a picky eater. Getting down to business, she reveals that while he was sleeping, she went through his documents and did some investigating. Her face turns grim as she drops a bombshell. The cruise ship the mages were using for their illicit trade belongs to none other than Wilhelmina. They exploited the ship's lax management, knowing she hardly ever used it to conduct their deals in secret. Roselida realizes this is all the Empress is doing, a twisted scheme to entangle her, Cashin, and Wilhelmina. The documents prove it, revealing a massive deal is set to go down on that ship tonight. Cashin gravely admits her instincts were right all along. Knowing their enemies will be desperate to reclaim the evidence, Roselida unveils her plan. She bought 2 first-class train tickets to the capital, creating a perfect decoy. The mages will assume they're on board, but she's arranged for Cashin's knights to take their place instead. While the knights create a diversion, Roselida reveals their true target, the cruise ship where the deal is going down. Impressed by her flawless plan, Cashin tells her he'd be lost without her. A little flustered, Roselida tells him to stop teasing and focus on the mission. Sporting new hair colors and elegant disguises, they transform into a completely different noble couple. Their objective is clear: infiltrate the high-stakes party on the ship and take down the Empress's entire operation from the inside. They are officially crashing the party. Just as she lays out the plan, Cashin suddenly grabs her arm. With a vulnerable look, he begs her not to abandon him. Taken aback, Roselida stands firm, reminding him that she already told him that wasn't going to happen. Cashin finally relaxes and agrees. He then asks her to just stay by his side without letting her thoughts wander. Before she can respond, he leans his head against her shoulder, completely spent. Roselida realizes he must be truly exhausted from the whole ordeal, noting how he always knows how to throw her off balance. After the chaos of the cruise ship incident finally dies down, Roselida meets with Cashin. She asks him about his visit to the Empress. With an amused grin, Cashin describes how the Empress was smiling, but her eyes and mouth were twitching uncontrollably with rage. Roselida knew the Empress was fuming because her plan to frame them had backfired spectacularly. Cashin then explains that Wilhelmina faces a minor investigation but is safe, since she has no ties to the mages. Roselida's expression hardens, realizing her friend almost got dragged into this dangerous mess. Cashin reveals the truth about Wilhelmina's father. Lord Gash was simply weighing his options, considering both him and Prince Charlie as potential sons-in-law to see who would be more profitable. This move had enraged the Empress in the past, and Roselida realizes her plan this time was even more ruthless. She wanted to eliminate Wilhelmina, her family, and Cashin all at once. With the case finally closed, Cashin expresses his relief. Roselida agrees, noting that summer is coming. Suddenly, a terrible realization dawns on her. The air grows tense as they both remember it's time for the dreaded first-half financial closing. The office doors burst open as aides flooded in, all demanding their attention. Requests piled up instantly. The second princess needed budget help, the Empress wanted assistance with her settlement, and countless other palaces sent over their own work. Buried in paperwork, Roselida wished they would stop calling her name. She knew this was Cashin's plan to gain power by making everyone dependent on them, but the sheer volume was overwhelming. Looking over, she saw even he had reached his limit, completely passed out on his desk amid a mountain of documents. Surrounded by flames of pure focus, Cashin blazed through the endless paperwork. Roselida, feeling the pressure mount, knew they had to cut down on these extra tasks. She announced a quick trip to the first prince's summer palace to sort things out. Upon arriving, she found the prince's aides taking a leisurely stroll, complaining about being swamped while calling the Winter Palace staff incompetent. Roselida stepped out, arms crossed. She furiously questioned when dumping your workload on others became efficient. While her team was run ragged, they were just chilling outside. Unacceptable. One of the prince's aides smugly calls her the Witch of the Winter Palace. Unfazed, Roselida announces she's here to return the work they pushed onto her team. At her signal, her staff drops massive stacks of paperwork at their feet. The lazy aides panic, but she shuts them down cold. She calmly explains this is their work to begin with, but if they insist it's unfair, she can always ask the Emperor to review the situation. The threat works instantly. Roselida leaves them drowning in their own efficient workload. Roselida thought her problems with the Summer Palace were over. But even after returning their workload, she was still drowning in her own. Just then, the first aide of the Summer Palace, Lord Ashwood, appeared with more urgent documents. Roselida couldn't believe his nerve. She bluntly reminded him that she'd just returned their files and was swamped. Reluctantly, she offered to look at them around 4 p.m. Lord Ashwood looked shocked when she coolly added that, regardless, she would be leaving work for the day at noon. Lord Ashwood smugly told Roselida she'd have to work around a schedule. With a sharp crack, the quill in her hand snapped. Her staff stared in shock. Livid, Roselida couldn't believe his nerve. The Winter Palace was already drowning in work, yet he waltzed in demanding favors and still expected to leave on time. She silently fumed, recalling how the Summer Palace already got tons of help from the Empress. Even without support, they still dumped their tiniest tasks on her team and expected her to just make time. Ashwood was left trembling. Lord Ashwood condescendingly claims he's overlooking her rude attitude to ask for cooperation. That's the last straw. Roselida explodes, telling him not to joke with her. Pointing at the stacks of documents, she declares the Winter Palace is too busy to offer free help. Cornered, he asks what she wants. With a sly grin, Roselida makes her demand. If he wants her team's help, he must become her personal assistant. When he scoffs at the idea, she challenges him, asking if serving a mere baron's daughter is so unpleasant. Lord Ashwood stammers that he's just worried about bringing shame to his palace. Not buying it, Roselida turns her back, coldly taking his hesitation as a rejection. Seeing his last chance slip away, Ashwood finally cracks. He grips the documents and reluctantly agrees to her terms. A triumphant smirk spreads across Roselida's face. The Summer Palace has had its fun working her team to death. Now, with their top aide under her thumb, she vows to make them feel every bit of that same pressure. The tables have officially turned.